Hello and welcome to another Excel tips video. I'm Sumit Bansal, and in today's video I'm going to show you a new Excel function, switch. So if you've been using multiple if conditions and you're nesting them inside one single formula, then instead of that you can use the switch function. And if you've used ifs function, which is if with an s, then you will find the switch function is very similar to that function. So in this video, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of using the switch function. And at the same time, I will also show you its comparison with other similar functions such as nested if formula or an ifs function. So let's see how it works. Let's start with a simple example where I have these server names and I have these codes for these servers. And instead of these code numbers, I want to get a text that is more descriptive. And I have this table here that tells me what code represents what status of the server. So 1 is operational, 2 is maintenance, 3 is idle, 4 is down. And if there is any other number, then the status is unknown. Now I can quickly get this result using the switch function. So the switch function takes expression as the first argument, and this expression could be a number, it could be a text, it could be a formula result. In this case, I'm going to be using a cell reference that contains a number. So I would use B4 here that has the server status code. Now, this value is going to be checked with the list of values I'm going to give in the switch function. So I have one here, and then I'm going to give a list of numbers within the switch function. So the switch function can go through those numbers, and whenever it finds a match for B4 where the value is the same, it is going to return the corresponding result value. So to give you an example, the first value number I would have is 1, and then the corresponding value that I want if the status code is 1 is operational. And similarly, you can construct the entire table within the switch function. So now the second code is 2, and the value that I wanted to give me is maintenance. Then it's 3. Then I wanted to give me idle. Then the status code is 4, which would mean down. And if there is no match, then there is also an argument in the function called the default argument, which means that once you are done giving the combination of value and result, the last argument could be something that would be returned if there is no match. So in this case, I would just say unknown. And now when I hit enter, it gives me operational here, and I can copy it for all these cells. So while I could have used a simple VLOOKUP function to get this data from this table, with the switch function, I've actually fed this entire table within the formula. So I do not need this table anymore. And my function is going to quickly check the code and give me the result based on where it finds the matching code. Now there are other similar functions that you can use instead of the switch function. So you can use the nested if function, or you can use an ifs function. But again, switch function is another function that you can use in case you have multiple conditions that you are analyzing, and then you can choose which function to use based on your preference. Here I have these dates, and I want to check whether this date is a weekday or a weekend. So weekdays would be if it is a Monday till Friday, and weekend would be Saturday and Sunday. So I can use the weekday function to get that value, that numeric value that tells me whether it's a weekday or a weekend. So I would use weekday function, and here I would take this date as the input. And then the return type is going to be 2 because I want Monday to be 1 and Tuesday to be 2 and Wednesday to be 3 and so on. So I would use 2 here, and when I do that, it returns a numeric value. And now I'm going to use this value within the switch function to return weekday or weekend. So let me delete this, and I'm going to use the switch function where my expression is going to be this. So my expression has weekday, and this returns a number, and then based on this number I can match it with a pair of values and results. So instead of me going 1 would be weekday, 2 would be weekday, 3 would be weekday, and on, I would flip it, and I would say if this value is 6, then it would be a weekend. If this value is a 7, then it would be a weekend, and in all the other cases it would be a weekday. So now when I hit enter, it gives me weekday here, and I can copy it for all these cells. So again, this is one way you can use switch function. You could have also used if or ifs function in this situation, but let me show you a smart way you can also use the switch function, but that will make your formula slightly better. So let me remove this, or actually let me keep this, and I'll copy it here. And here I'm going to use the same function, but In this case, instead of me giving the weekday function as the expression, I'm going to give the expression as true. And now I can use conditions where if I get a value as true, then I can return the corresponding result. So this allows me to actually now use conditions, which is something that I wasn't able to do in this case. So if I go back to this case, you can see I have this expression here, but then all these values are static. I cannot use conditions in this. But if I change this and if I start with true as my expression, it allows me to then use conditions. So what I can do in this case is I can come here and I can say weekday, this date, comma 2, if this value is greater than 5. So this is going to be true only for weekend, then my value is going to be weekend, and in all the other cases it would be weekday. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the same result and I can copy it for all these cells. So you can see this formula is slightly better because what I'm trying to do is I have my expression as true and then I've used this condition which would either evaluate to true or false. If this becomes false, then I get weekday, which is the default value in case nothing is matched. And if this is true, then I get a weekend. So this is again a smart way of using switch function where you can start with a true or a false and then you can use multiple conditions within the function. Here I have these names and these scores, and I want to get their grades based on this table here. So I'm going to show you how to do this using the switch function and then also show you the same thing that can be done using if and ifs function. So coming back to the switch function, if I use the regular construct where I take this score as the first argument, it is going to be a very long formula because I will have to create almost 100 value result pairs where if the score is 1, then the grade should be say F, and if the score is 2, then what should be the grade, and if the score is 3, then what should be the grade. So instead of creating such a long formula with switch, what I can do is use the second construct I showed you in the last example, where I start with true that allows me to use multiple conditions within the switch function itself. So let me show you what I mean. So here the first argument is an expression and I'm going to use true here. And now I'm going to have conditions based on the score so that it can give me the grade. So here my condition would be B4 is equal to greater than equal to 90. And if that is true, then I want the grade to be A. And if B4 is greater than equal to 80, then I want the grade to be B, and so on. So let me quickly construct this formula. So I've created this formula here where I have all these conditions. So if my score is greater than 90, then the grade is going to be A. If it is greater than 80, then the grade is going to be B, and so on. And in the end, if none of these conditions are true, then the formula is going to return F. And now when I hit enter, it gives me this value here and I can copy it for all these cells. So you can see instead of using the regular construct, when you start using true here, it actually makes your formula a lot more useful and shorter. Another thing you need to know about this formula is when you're using true, it is going to go and check all these conditions, but as soon as it finds the first true condition, it is going to give you the result and the formula is going to stop. So in this case, if let's say my score is 96, then in this formula, all of these conditions are going to be true because my score is 96, it is greater than 90, it is also greater than 80 and greater than 60 and so on. But as soon as it encounters any expression that gives me true, then it would give me the grade for that value and the formula is going to stop. Now let me also show you the formulas that you can use if you're using if or ifs, just to compare it with the switch function. So here I already have the formula in the comment. So let me copy it and let me put the formula here. And this is the if function. Now, if you compare it with switch function, so this is the switch function here. If you compare it with the if function, lengthwise, you may think that these functions are similar, but if function is a little more complex because we have to use nested if function. We have to use condition and then if formula within if functions multiple times. So this becomes quite complicated very soon. So if you're using a nested if formula, then definitely try and use switch function because that is going to be easier. But if you're using ifs function, then it may or may not be easier. So let me show you the ifs function as well. So this is the function, and let me drag this down so you can see that all of these formulas are giving me the same result. But in ifs and switch, I think both of them are equally easy to use. And in most cases, I personally prefer using the ifs function because the construct is easy. You can use multiple conditions within the formula as the standard construct. So in most cases, I find ifs function to be slightly easier to use. But again, it's your personal preference. Both ifs function and switch function are going to work in situation like this. And here is another similar example where I have these names and their sales values, and I want to calculate commission based on this table. So again, I can use the switch function, and I would start with true, and then I would create those conditions. So my condition is going to be if the value in this cell is greater than or equal to 50,000, then the commission is going to be 10%. So now when I hit enter, it gives me the commission value, but I want the actual sales commission value, not the percentage. So I can come here and I can multiply this with the actual sales value, and I can then drag this down. So again, you can see a very similar construct that I already showed you in the previous example, and I was able to calculate commission based on this table. Now, as I mentioned, switch is not the only way to do this. You can use a VLOOKUP if your table is formatted properly. You can use ifs function. You can use the nested if function. Again, based on your situation, you can choose which one to use. Switch is a new function, and it is good to know about these new functions because there could be situations where this might be a more appropriate function to use compared to the other ones. That's it in this video. I hope you found this useful. Also, if you're liking these videos, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the bell icon so that you never miss out on any new Excel tips video I come up with. Thank you and have a nice day.